An alert transmission shattered every frequency. A massive human warship had been detected. Panic rippled through each star-spanning throne. Voices shaking, leaders demanded answers. They were impossible, but their screens said the unthinkable. Now everything they knew was threatened by a single human craft. Across the cosmos, alien rulers were similarly receiving the same grim update. A strange human vessel had crossed secure borders without a warning shot. Empires that once dismissed humanity as insignificant scrambled to understand how such a ship could arrive undetected. News bulletins echoed the same grim phrase, "Human warship confirmed," like a curse rattling even the oldest dynasties. In glimmering council halls built atop gilded space stations, the highest upon high-held emergency summits, coaches, clad in ceremonial uniforms, studied sensor logs that were inscrutable. How had one ship slipped past centuries of fortified checkpoints? When humans were first discarded as a minor species, nobody thought aliens would need to worry that they would develop stealth and weaponry capable of rivaling the largest fleets. A tidal wave of confusion spread out. Merchants, despite cut-off trade convoys, terrified that any shipping lane might get turned into a battlefield. Usually lax border garrisons snapped to readiness, sending urgent queries up the chain of command. The entirety of this was not known to any one empire, so they looked to each other in begrudging cooperation, each hoping that the shared data might lead to the unraveling of mankind's newfound power. For decades, extraterrestrial powers had observed Earth from a distance. They were witnessing a species struggling against its own nature, but also endowed with its own grit. Humans survived pandemics and fought other disasters and set their sights on the stars. Some observers speculated that if humanity ever did unify, it would become a significant threat. Many dismissed this as paranoia. The advanced empires with centuries of interstellar experience would surely be on top. That attitude vaporized the moment scanners picked up the human craft. An automated outpost disappeared without sending up alarms. Patrol corvettes claimed brief tracks of a slim silhouette before losing its seconds after. Even the most advanced sensor grids detected merely ghost-like echoes. It was as if the warship employed some new dimension of technology that left it invisible to basic detection systems. In classified discussions, panicked voices suggested quick strikes, clever ambushes, or even desperate partnerships. But none of these measures were guaranteed to work. The first real clue came when a heavily damaged frigate transmitted a visual, an enormous dark hull bristling with esoteric armaments, edges glowing with odd energies that defied category. By the time the transmission finished, the frigate was gone. Speculation soared. Did humans, perhaps, stumble upon ancient ruins brimming with lost wonders? Or had they somehow quietly developed engines that punched folds into space in ways hypothetical for mainstream science? Belief in the Empire's invulnerability crumbled. A number of those officials, once self-satisfied, now struggled with real fear, scrambling for any strategy that might avert the speculated attack. The whole status quo was at stake. Civilians, who knew little of the details, felt the strain in their leaders' gazes. Cargo shipments stalled. Travel advisories exploded. Rumors circulated that the human warship was equipped with a planet-killer device or a doomsday beam. None of the officials denied such assertions outright. The silence from government spokespeople only fed fear. Militaries throughout the galaxy readied for the worst. Commanders scrambled to reorder fleets, turning them toward the sector where the warship had last been tracked. Some bristled at the suggestion that numbers alone would overwhelm any human incursion. But losses early on suggested another story. The silent vanishings of whole patrol groups means standard tactics could end badly. In the silence of a council hall on a far-off capital world, an aged state figure stepped away from the formality to soberly point out a grim truth. This one human ship, unerred and inexpugnable, had the power to crumble what had taken centuries for aliens to achieve. If all of humanity was capable as this craft, then the empires were threatened as never before. Ancient dynasties faced their own fragility for the first time. Desperation crept into every plan of attack. Scientists scrambled to develop countermeasures, searching through archived data on Earth's past inventions. Diplomats mumbled about treaties, though no one knew if the humans would consent. The possibility that humans had come to seek revenge for past slights hung in the air like an unvoiced dread. But the biggest question remained. Why was the warship here? Had Earth transformed so completely that it now flung a behemoth across interstellar frontiers? Have humans been left to accomplish this task alone, or did the new alliance of lesser-known species band together in support of fellow creatures? The thinness of the official intelligence reports illustrated how little the empires knew about Earth in its current state. And so, with the heart thumping, empire builders waited. They watched the scanner feed change, anticipating where the warship would go. Some 00021 prayed for a peaceful resolution. Others, steeled by centuries of combat, readied themselves to crush the threat with all the means at their command. But no matter how they went about it, every empire agreed upon one thing: that the detection of a human warship had changed the balance of power in the galaxy overnight. The human warship glider smoothed its way through the blackness of space. It was no ordinary craft. Generations of engineers had tooled and refined every system to withstand monstrous odds. The empires thought their fleets unrivaled, and yet humans had poured every drop of ingenuity possible into building a ship to end all ships, one that could take on even the most auto-deleting armadas. And at the core of the frigate, experimental reactors churned, each one producing a titanic amount of energy. Shield grids stacked in multiple layers, like overlapping fields, prepared to disperse or deflect almost any attack. An advanced warp manifold had the ship swooping through star systems in mere minutes, well out of the standard detection windows. If one coil broke, the resulting chain reaction could wipe out the vessel. But for mission's sake, it was a risk Earth accepted. The crew was the best humanity had to offer. Veterans who had survived earlier alien skirmishes fought alongside fresh prodigies conscripted from secret academies. Their connection was forged by the understanding that they were humanity's last line of defense and its greatest hope. Resources on homeworld were few and far between. The warship transported Earth's last hope to avoid subjugation or death. Within narrow corridors, one could sense the hum of unstoppable energy. Readouts of alien formations glowed over every console, each one more frightening than the last. Weapons officers screened for likely targets with a stoic calm, priming rail cannons and particle beams for a fight no simulation could ever fully model. The pilot monitored jump vectors, keeping the warship one step ahead of the Empire's net. At home, an undercurrent of desperation drove the ship's construction. Resource shortages and unrelenting expansionism by alien neighbors had backed Earth into a corner. Appeals to diplomacy were met with only condescension. Surrender was often demanded, and every refusal came at the expense of human life. So, with no other options available, humanity invested every resource it possessed into creating a machine that could cut through the galactic arrogance. The mission was explicit: break the stranglehold. Navigate out of the quarantined areas. Confront the largest threats. If negotiations proved futile, then would Earth's champion hold the line? Make the empires acknowledge humanity's sovereignty. Each pulse of the warship's reactor resounded with a promise. Humanity would never again submit to tyranny. As the vessel approached a nexus of vital shipping lanes, the crew faced a crossroads. They were aware that an alien blockade lay just ahead, probably under the orders of high officials. Even if they turned back, Earth would still be vulnerable. And if they charged ahead, an epic showdown was all but assured. Yet no one voiced retreat. That moment of defiance had taken Earth too long to arrive. In quiet synchronicity, the crew readied for the expected confrontation. Missile racks rattled as last checks were performed. Gravimetric scanners buzzed, picking up distortions that spoke of concealed ambushes. The cruise ship's strategic team plotted a meticulous plan: draw enemy fleets out into overextension, then use updated weapons to puncture through. Tension mounted. Just the presence of the warship was already shaking up the cosmos, leading leaders to question everything they thought they knew. But fear alone wouldn't save humanity. The ship needed to prove, without a doubt, that Earth was no prize to be won. Metal shone from each station. They bore the hopes of billions who dreamed of freedom. Deployment complete, the warship slowed, searching for signs of a battle to come. Intelligence from the blockade was dispatched in squadrons of drones. Each thrum of the warp engines shivered beneath a thick veil of suspense. In the crew's faces, one glimpsed the undying determination that no empire's menace could suppress. A final status report pulsed green over the bridge. The enemy had the next move. Would the blockade immediately open fire or try to negotiate? Would they deride humankind with last orders? In one direction or another, the warship's route lay ahead, writing a new chapter in humanity's odyssey among the stars. It began with a distant flash. A ring of alien warships, bristling with weapon ports, fired a synchronized volley toward the human warship. High-intensity beams drew razor-sharp lines through the darkness, meeting at a single point. With reflexes honed over countless drills, the pilot accelerated around lethal bursts that could vaporize any unshielded craft. Within seconds, more alien vessels had engaged, and the entire sector exploded to life with color. Missile you could see arcing in from every angle with trails of ion exhaust behind them. Sources said the warship's shield arrays lit up, dispersing each impact in a haze of crackling energy. Inside the craft, alarms beeped, but the crew stayed cool, reacting with calm efficiency. The warship retaliated. Batteries of rail gats rumbled, launching tungsten slugs at near-relativistic velocities. One slug punched directly through the bow of a cruiser, setting off a chain reaction in its munitions hold. A fireball consumed the vessel, sending debris flying in a dazzling explosion. Nearby vessels sped away to escape the rain of deadly missiles. Determined to stop the human invader, an alien commander ordered a flanking move. Flights of agile fighters sped in a broad curve, releasing volleys of homing torpedoes. The warship's close-in weapon system turrets spewed brilliant tracer rounds, exploding warheads in midair before they could hit their marks. Some torpedoes squeaked by, smashing against the ship's shields. External plating belched out smoke, but the warship continued to writhe, still unkillable. Amid the fray, the debris of shipwrecks floated in the fray. Wave after wave of reinforcements was poured into the fight by the defenders, hoping to drown the single craft in numbers. But every new squadron learned the same lesson. The warship was a top predator. It had instantaneously adapted to new threats, shifting shield harmonics or using advanced stealth bursts to obscure targeting. Some of the alien captains reported that every conventional strategy fell flat, leaving them reeling about in confusion. During a critical moment, a formation of capital ships tried to corner the human ship. Their beams locked up in lethal crossfire, trapping the warship in interpenetrating cages of incendiary plasma. For a heartbeat, it seemed like an assured kill. Observers saw the intruder's shield flicker from the punishing assault. Then, in a maneuver deemed impossible even by some of the warship's crew, the ship slipped through a flickering opening in the crossfire, skimming through by only a few meters. The heavy artillery was suddenly turned on each other, and the flames of the imbroglio grew higher. Pandemonium ensued. A friendly fire hit one capital ship's reactor, which then went critical. Its blast generated shockwaves that rumbled through the entire blockade. Taking advantage of the distraction, the warship had then lunged deeper into the formation and unleashed devastating broadsides at key command vessels. Those ships' officers had only a moment to call a general alarm before rail slugs punctured hulls, turning the ship's insides into confetti. A murmur rippled through the alien ranks, followed by an ominous feeling of doom. Every plan, every contingency, was defeated before this unmanned craft. Data logs indicated that the humans wielded firepower exceeding predicted thresholds. Even worse, their tactics were cunning on par with elite alien strategists. Skirmish after skirmish resulted in catastrophic losses for the defenders. Many junior captains called for retreat, but high command ordered them to hold. Pride overrode caution. They did not believe that one warship could penetrate a whole blockade. The Empire's admirals would not allow a mere upstart Earth technology to threaten their centuries-long reign. Subjecting themselves to the full brunt of the pounding, the aliens stubbornly channeled their greatest vessels into the tempest, content to overwhelm the intruder with superior force. Dreadnoughts clawed forward in a line, weapons of Doomsday class chiming on their longbows. Their raking fire shredded vast tracts of empty space, nearly blotting out the silhouette of the warship. But the intruder flew right through the near misses, activating powerful beam weapons that some claimed could penetrate standard shielding. Shining lances penetrated several dreadnoughts, cupping their hulls like crushed Pepsi cans as the two crews were horrified to watch. The devastation rendered the industry in broad strokes of fire and mangled steel. What might have been considered a symbol of unstoppable empire, the blockade, might also have looked like a junkyard of wreckage. Survivors relayed frantic updates, their voices trembling with fear. High command, safely perched in their bunkers, saw the destruction and felt a chill of fear settle in their hearts. This was no random incursion. This was an omen that the galaxy's own balance of power had changed forever. The human warship locked onto the flagship of the blockade in the final moments of the clash. Focusing its munitions, it pounded the vessel with punishing accuracy. Shields blared, hull plating warped, whole decks caved in from the pressure. When the flagship exploded, the shockwave traveled outward, upending Allied ships that got too near. Those who stayed knew the fight was done. The human warship, with fresh scars, still bristled deadly. No other way to stop its advance appeared possible. Down in the scattered corporate command centers, leaders faced a grim reality. Their doom was all but guaranteed unless some miracle strategy was uncovered. The unabashed had arrived, and it soared under a flag of humanity. Stung from the catastrophe at the blockade, the leaders of the galaxy met with haste at an emergency summit in a giant orbital bastion. The scabrous messengers were sent hurtling carrying the terrible news. Whole fleets had been routed by a single human ship. The shine of their buffed-up council chamber was matched by the fear that seemed imprinted on every official's face. They had looked at the data from ships that survived, and it showed humiliating defeats. Not only did the warship outmaneuver their best captains, it bore arms that circumvented usual defenses. Each piece of evidence hammered home the same point. The unstoppable intruder was no rumor. It was a harsh, cruel reality that would destroy their entire civilization. The leaders, fueled by desperation, planned a final counterstrike. They would pool all their resources, unleash the largest of dreadnoughts, and organize thousands of lesser craft into a single striking force. Driven by the aim, trap the warship in a narrow channel of the cosmos, saturate its hull with irreplaceable hellfire, and eliminate the menace in one surefire clash. Propaganda channels run stirring displays of solidarity to boost morale. It claimed that if all our species came together, victory was assured. Past rivalries were blown away. Researchers churned day and night to develop fresh energy disruptors specifically tuned to find a weakness in the warship's shields. Top generals proposed a distraction tactic: bang on the drum to simulate a retreat, then pounce on the intruder from multiple angles. In theory, it sounded feasible. Fleets from distant star systems came, forming an armada that was so large it shaded entire navigation grids. The fortress's scanners revealed a history-making assemblage of battleships, carriers, and stealth frigates. They flitted in close formation, bristling with new weapon bundles. With these numbers, officers felt success was inevitable. No power, even one as enigmatic as the human warship, could survive such a squeeze of steel. As the hour approached, scouts hurried to find the human vessel. They eventually spotted an energy spike near a cluster of derelict mining outposts. Eagerly, the armada sprung its trap. Hiding behind large asteroids and wrecked stations, they readied their new disruptors. Decoys simulated the signals of an Empire fleet in throes, luring the warship within. Sure enough, the human craft showed up on the outskirts. It moved forward with slow assurance, surveying the field of debris. The whole armada held its breath. At the appropriate signal, the rogue ships sprung to life. Barrage sets of disruptor beams flared, converging on the warship's shield bubble. The force dwarfed anything to date. A victorious scream came over the comms. For a split second, the warship's shield flickered and fizzed violently. Panels along its hull flickered, scorched by the precision energy blasts. Some of the fortress officers cheered, convinced they had discovered humanity's Achilles heel at last. But then a shocking thing happened. The warship throbbed with a sudden flash of raw power, as if it had drained the disruptor's own energy. And the very next moment, it had released a spinning flash of plasma washing over the closest battleships like a galactic tidal surge. Hull after hull buckled under the onslaught. The disruptor cannons, now overwarmed, either malfunctioned or detonated. Cries of shock erupted across the communication lines. Class lines fell apart into random disarray. The smaller ships panicked, ramming each other while attempting to flee the roiling plasma. The Armada's meticulously planned bait and trap unraveled into a chaotic masthead bash. Now desperate commands sputtered over every frequency. Admirals barked out orders for flanking maneuvers, but the warship seemed one step ahead with every move they made. It curved like a reed, pouring out railgun salvos that cut through carriers. Even the latest dreadnoughts, built for total war, fell victim to a handful of lethal hits. No pilot could keep pace with the intruder's agility or fire discipline. As the fighting continued, a shocking breakthrough came via terse transmissions. The warship was sending a coded call over a concealed channel. It rushed intelligence teams to interpret it. What they discovered further shattered illusions. It was not just a war machine, the human craft, but a ship that delivered an ultimatum: stop your unending expansions, or be met with inevitable retaliation. Earth had apparently called for an end to centuries of oppression. That revelation shattered the solidarity of the Allied leaders. Some demanded escalation, while others, rattled by the unstoppable onslaught, called for diplomacy. Meanwhile, the warships' relentless maelstrom ripped deeper into the Armada, and there was no time for consensus. Rival factions popped up halfway through the battle, each laying claim to a distinct methodology, and the Grand Alliance began to splinter. A swirl of cataclysmic explosions illuminated the sector. The once invulnerable fortress station was pounded by random fire. Inside, the commanders watched in horror as their last gamble crumbled under the relentless human onslaught. Their ultimate hope had drained away, singing, in the shadow of a new cosmic law that Earth appeared prepared to impose. Wreckage of warships floated in the starfield, caught in the strobing weapons fire that continued to blaze in pockets of the battlefield. The immense fortress station, once the embodiment of invulnerable power, shuddered from cycle after cycle of detonations. Whole decks ruptured, shock waves rippling outward. Crew aboard smaller frigates watched nervously, not sure if they should stay to fight or retreat to safer systems. In the heart of this madness, the human warship sailed with steady grace. It poked along, pushing into the center of the Armada. Dreadnoughts of alien origin, haggard but functional, fired their death rattle, sending their last bolts directly into the invader's gut. But the warship's shield glittered, absorbing or ricocheting each burning beam. Wherever a missile achieved some kind of hit, however lame and impotent, the warship shot back with a devastating response, tearing open hulls as if the metal was cloth. Within the command center of the fortress, commanders watched the blood-soaked battlefield through shattered holoscreens. Their once great alliance had splintered into unruly pockets. Whole fleets lay smoldering wreckage. Command frequencies crackled with requests for reinforcements that would not be coming. The outraged officials called for the deployment of munitions that were otherwise off-limits, locked away in deep vaults. Others realized the hour was too late. They had nothing in their arsenal that could compete with the warship's unrelenting might. A bouquet of copper-jacketed rail slugs smeared into the support struts when the fortress's defensive towers swung around to track the intruder. The towers fell in a blizzard of sparks and twisted steel. A debilitating sense of doom gripped the high command. Their noble platform a tomb, its thick walls an insipid gateway against the ravaging cyclone. The warship moved in, firing thrusters to dodge an last volley of desperate shots. Missiles exploded in from all sides, but flare-point defense lasers flared and negated them in seconds. And chaff and debris blinded sensors. There were explosions banging around the fortress's outer hull. Emergency sirens blared. The lights in the command center flickered, throwing long shadows across terrified officials. A hush fell. Then the warship opened fire with a torrent of coruscating beams of plasma, each guided by harrowingly precise targeting. In a matter of moments, the heavily guarded main reactor of the fortress was hit in numerous places. A chain reaction began. Fuel lines exploded, and roaring tongues of fire raced from one corridor to another. Outmatched soldiers scrambled for life pods, in vain. Top leaders dashed toward concealed hangars, looking to depart with as much honor as they could claim. The sword blow came in a glare of white-hot brilliance. The sealed reactor of the fortress imploded, spraying debris into the void. Molten debris scourged the remaining defense ships as they scrambled to escape. Alarms dropped to static, save for the rumble of rending metal. The indomitable warship sat amid the debris of drifting shards, mostly unharmed. Knowing that there was no triumph to be had, the remaining enemy commanders ordered a complete withdrawal. Engines roared to life. Warping out in different directions, they left the station's wreckage behind. In a fiery shower of rockets, bright light, and propulsion, command ships once bedecked with the Empire's proud sigil disappeared from sensors, scattering into the night. Their governments, now leaderless or on the run, had lost the will to keep going. Inside the warship, relief was mixed with resolve. Systems stressed, but working. Medics treated the wounded. Technicians put out small fires. The crew assessed damage. They had shattered the last bastion in the way of Earth having its freedom. And while they mourned each life lost, they knew their victory would help change the galaxy for generations to come. The commanders with swaggering bravado now crawled to some unknown corner, their fleets devastated. The chatter on communication lines, atomic and otherwise, was frantic and often incoherent. Senior ministers accusing their counterparts, admirals citing sabotage, panicked regional leaders begging for safe passage. An irreversible rush of human strategy had set them all flying. One last message from the warship transmitted through open frequencies. Humanity called a halt to mad expansions and forced subjugations. Refusal would bring Pyrrhic, unstoppable consequences. Earth would not be on the fringes anymore. With the Bastion station in shambles and the Allied fleet dispersed, the pronouncement echoed like a thunderclap of the stars. As the battle-weary warship powered down its main cannons, the field fell silent. God knows how many destroyed capital ships, twisted wrecks, and burning fighter carcasses that hang within the darkness. The warship spun away from the shattered station, searching for lingering threats. None appeared. The relentless advance had culminated in human victory. Remnants and debris created a graveyard for fallen fleets. Once proud ships, now only remnants of something gone. Twisted chunks of plating floated by silent turrets. The fortress station, a shapeless ruin, glowed dimly with lingering fires. No victory parades, no last stands. Just infinite wreckage strewn in the wake of the uncrushable human dreadnought. Amid the wreckage, survivors from multiple species clung to destroyed ships, urgently transmitting calls for assistance. Battered though it was, the human warship made no further aggression. It simply kept its watchful position on high, shields up, but weapons held in silence. No one dared provoke it. Through whisper networks, gallows gossip spread that Earth had permanently destabilized the galactic order. Behind closed doors throughout the galaxy, fallen leaders struggled against their humiliation. They had bragged of invincibility, only to be routed in just a few hours by a single intruder. Some tried to explain the loss away, attributing it to sabotage or freak accidents. Some came to accept the cruel reality of the facts. Humanity had evolved beyond anyone's comprehension. The implacable warship embodied a time when Earth was not to be trifled with anymore. Planets once oppressed by these fallen leaders ignited beacons of defiance. Word of the human victory spread faster than light, inciting uprisings. Local governors were suddenly faced with galvanized populations demanding autonomy. Empires that spanned dozens of star systems appeared to collapse overnight. Their largest fleets lie in ashes, their chain of command shattered. Down on Earth and its handful of allied worlds, a headiness intermingled with retrospection. They had challenged impossible odds, pulverizing the idea that the galaxy was the domain of only elderly powers. Military strategists scrutinized data logs and sought to replicate or even improve upon the warship's accomplishments. Scientists examined alien tech they had salvaged from the crash site, imagining new breakthroughs that would help secure humanity's place among the stars. Fatigue bore down heavily on the warship's crew. They had fought innumerable engagements, had lived near-death experiences, and had been successful. And now, picking their way through the debris, they felt a solemn gratitude for surviving. But they were aware that they carried the hopes of millions of abused varieties who regarded humankind as a beacon of rebellion. Though battered, the warship had become a symbol that even the most menacing tyrants could be brought low by courage and ingenuity. Diplomatic messages flooded in within hours of the last battle, minor polities asking for treaties and offering resources for protection. Imperial vassals flocked to the new Earth-dominated alliance in a bid to reforge a path for civilization on more equitable lines. The galaxies that had laughed at human ability were now begging for cooperation. But the new reality was not to everyone's taste. Some enclaves colluded to exact retribution. They thought to restore the old order. Whispers of rogue admirals assembling shadow fleets suggested continued threats. Earth could not rest easy. The invulnerable warship had opened a new future, but at a cost. It had put a big target on humanity's back. The next battle could be even deadlier if adversaries took time to adjust. However, the immediate aftermath was a stark turnaround. Alien dominions that had once mocked human ambition were cornered or cast down. Words such as humility and coexistence spread more widely than ever. A golden age could follow, if Earth could shepherd these transitions wisely. Or if greed or fear prevailed, the galaxy could descend further into bloody chaos. In the meantime, the indomitable warship loomed over the biggest chunk of the fortress station, scanning for any markers of sabotage or concealed threats. Its thrusters hummed gently, a mute guardian in a void that had seen so many horrors. The crew watched, fixated, as pockets of survivors fled or raised signs of surrender, unsure how Earth would react. Then, slowly and with studied cool, the warship headed toward deep space. A last signal crackled over every common frequency. Humankind fights for its own future. Oppressors must cease. We will not yield again. Those four simple words had the force of an empire behind them. The battered craft, unbroken in spirit, set a course past the wreckage field and blazed a new trail through the stars. Galactic chieftains cowered in secret bunkers, quaking at the sound of the message echoing. They knew this was only the first chapter of a longer saga. Earth has shown that it was no meek frontier world. It was capable of unseating the loftiest empires. And as the warship that could not be stopped disappeared from scanners, many were speaking the same grim thought in whispers. Humanity was just getting started.